Good morning, everyone. As you mentioned, my name is Ken, and I run the Central Growth team at Google. I've had the good fortune of being able to work at companies like Zynga and Facebook and Google and help drive analytics for those companies. Being able to work at those companies has given me the opportunity along the way to learn that there are different ways people can approach growth. And what I have learned most importantly is that for companies to be able to drive growth most effectively, the best way to do it is to think about growth as a science. And that's what I'd like to talk about this morning. So I want to start with this statistic here, which is always amazing to me and a little bit disturbing, but certainly powerful, which is that 80% of new products fail. And by fail, we don't mean they just absolutely fall flat and disappear. By fail, we mean that they don't do nearly as well as we expected them to do. And this also works for new features of products as well. They don't do as well as we expected, not nearly as well. Now, most of these products, or many of these products, do great things for users. So clearly, just building and launching a great product isn't sufficient to guarantee that it will successfully land. So while there's definitely an art to building and launching great products, there's very much a science to ensuring that it lands. And that's where growth and the growth process come in. If I had to sum up what growth is in a sentence, this is what I've been working on for the last 7 or 8 years. It's really thinking about how can we take the scientific method and apply it to moving a metric that we really care about. So we've all probably learned about the scientific method in 3rd grade. It's been around for something like 800 years. It's been the foundation of how we've moved forward in science. And this is a quick summary. So let me share what this is, and then we'll see how we can apply this to what we're trying to do in growth to get reliable, consistent growth. So there's 3 main steps in the scientific method. The first one is the observe phase, where you look at something that you really want to understand, some phenomenon. You collect data on it. Then you go to the second part, which is the hypothesize stage, which is you try and come up with a way to explain what you just saw. So you can predict what will happen in the future, and so you can change what will happen in the future. And then the third part is you run experiments to see if your hypothesis was right. And then there's that arrow going back, because most of the time your experiments are going to fail, but you'll learn something from them. So you go back, you adjust your hypothesis, and you try again. So that's the scientific method. This is the essence of the growth process, and this is all that we're going to be covering today. This is really the same 3 steps. We've given them slightly different names. There's the understand phase, where you do a lot of analysis to figure out what's going on with your product and your users. There's the identify phase, where we're trying to figure out a hypothesis about, well, what is driving growth, what's holding growth back, and then we run experiments. And I want to highlight this part here, this last part, the iterate part, because many, many times what you will see when you're working on growth projects and growth initiatives within a company is you'll have somebody who says, we tried that, it didn't work. If you drill in a little bit deeper, what you'll find out is, yeah, they tried it once, it didn't work. It almost never works the first time. In fact, if it does work the first time, whoever ran that experiment should be the person buying your lottery tickets. Consider them very lucky. You always have to go back and iterate. So it's a key part that there's one step that I see people miss. It's to go back and iterate. They try it, say it didn't work, and then they move on to something else. You need to iterate. So let me drill into those 3 steps. The understand phase, the first one. The real goal of this phase is to figure out what are the growth levers. What are the things that I can do that are going to optimize my growth, accelerate my growth. And when I talk about this thing called the growth lever, what I mean is these are usually, in marketing, maybe different campaigns I can optimize. In the product, it's different features and different flows I can optimize. We're trying to figure out what are the levers, which ones are the most important, that when I move those levers, the metric I really care about will move as well. So that's what we're trying to do. There's 3 steps, 3 things you want to do in this phase. The first one is you really need to figure out what is it that you're trying to measure for growth? And we refer to this as your North Star metric. This is the one metric that is capturing what you mean by successfully growing a product. If we're talking about a scientific process, we need to be able to measure something to see if our initiatives are actually working. That's what the North Star metric is. And two main points about this metric that I want to highlight. First is that it should reflect increasing the value that you're delivering to users. So if you're thinking about something like YouTube, user value might be more videos being consumed, because that's really what YouTube is about. If you're thinking about something like WhatsApp, it would be something like more messages being sent, because that means we're delivering more value. It's not just more users on WhatsApp, for example, because having more users doesn't really mean that they're getting more value. But if they're sending more messages, that's really what this app was built for, so that's delivering more value. So you want to figure out a North Star metric that is really powerful at helping encapsulate user value. And another thing that I want to stress is that it needs to be one metric. This is pretty hard. A lot of teams struggle with how to get down to one metric because there are, of course, many things that you want to focus on. But to do this well, you have to pick one. It's what gives your team focus. And also, the tools that I'm going to describe in just a second are built around optimizing a particular metric. They optimize one metric. If you've got multiple metrics, you can't really optimize for all of them at the same time. So once you have that, you can start the process. You can start this scientific approach towards driving growth. So we have that metric. The next thing we want to do is build out something that we call a user flow. And what this is an example, it's kind of a template. And really what I want to share is that it gives you a visual way to figure out what's driving growth in your product. It helps you figure out some growth levers. So there's really 5 sections in here, and they're color-coded. So the red section down the middle, the spine, that's really the user's journey through your app, whatever it may be, your service. Everything from acquisition to onboarding to activation to finally getting them to an engaged and retained state. So that's the core of it. Then we've got on the left, we've got that blue section. That's where the main sources of your users, new users, are coming from. Then we've got those green sections, which are user flows. These are details about what happens. What are all the steps in my onboarding process or my activation process? So I can really see a lot better what users are actually going through. Then I've got that yellow section in the bottom right. These are the things within the app, the actions that users are taking within your app, within your service, that are highly correlated to users monetizing better or engaging better or retaining longer. So you need to identify what those are. And then the top right, the purple section, these are the ways we get users. These are the ways that users are coming back to use your product or service. And so once you've mapped this all out, you end up putting numbers on all of those arrows that say the percentage of people that successfully go from one box to the next. And what you'll quickly find is that some of these are working really well, and that other ones you've got very, very leaky funnels, leaky flows. And so you want to double down on those things like the yellow section. Oh, well, there's this feature in the app that is really retaining users. If I can get users in Google Photos to back up their photos to the cloud, that really drives retention. But only, I'm making up a number here, 30% of them do that. I would want to drive more people there because I see that people who do that are retained, but I don't have enough people going there. Or I might find in one of those green flows that on the 4th step, I'm losing 80% of my people. How do I improve that? So this is one of the ways that helps me figure out what some of my key growth levers are. The other tool we use is a growth model, whereas the user flow is a very visual way of looking at what's driving growth. This is a more functional way of looking at it. And it's the notion that if I have my North Star metric, in this case I'm using the example of daily active users, DAU, if I think about my North Star metric as the output of some process, moving that metric is the output of some process that users are going through, what the growth model does is it helps me investigate what the inputs to that process are. So, for example, if I've got daily active users at the output, one way I can start splitting that down into the inputs is, well, that's a combination of new users plus my returning users. All right, so now I can at least break it down a little bit and think about, well, I can increase new users and I can increase returning users, and both of them move that key metric. I can drill down a little bit further, and I won't go into all the details here, but I just want to show you a kind of flavor of what these tools look like. So I can take new users, and what the first 3 lines, when I expand that, are showing is that these are new users coming from visits to the App Store, from either viral invites, mobile ads, or marketing and PR. I add those together. The next line is multiplying that by the conversion rate of the people who, on average, land on the App Store page, who convert to an actual download, and then multiply that again by the percent that actually get through the activation phase. That's my new users. And I can do something similar with return users. Where are they coming from, notifications, or whatever it may be. I can even go down maybe one step further, like, well, the people that come from viral invites, what are the elements of that? And I would probably stop about here. I wouldn't want to go any further. But everything on the right side of an equal sign is another growth lever. That's an input. If I move that, the output will move. So I combine both of these, the growth model and the levers that I've identified from the user flow, and that's the core. That's what I start working with. These are the things that I'm going to then, through the rest of the process, try and move. So that brings us to the second step, which is the identify phase. What I'm doing here is the first step was about figuring out what those growth levers are. The second step is figuring out ways that I can move that lever, because I ultimately want to move the North Star metric. But that brings up a question. Why am I focusing on moving the levers? Why don't I just focus on moving the North Star metric itself? And it's a really good question. It goes back to the notion that if I want to think about this scientifically, and I want to test different things, I have to be able to measure a statistically significant difference generated by my experiment in some metric for me to know that whatever initiative I just ran is actually working. The problem is, the challenge is that most cases that I can think of, most examples of experiments that I would run, it's very difficult to have a single experiment that will, in a statistically significant way, move the North Star metric by itself. There's so many other factors influencing it. So what do? This is where growth levers come in. And the example I'll use here is think about gears on a clock. I can look at an hour hand on a clock. And now I know it's moving, but if I can stare at it for a little while and there's no visible movement, it is moving, but I can't see it because it's moving quite slowly. But if I dig a little deeper into that clock, I can see that there are smaller gears, like the second hand gear. That I can see moving very quickly. I can sit down, and within a very, very short amount of time, I can see, yes, this clock is working. I can see the gear moving. I can visibly see it. It's just easier to move. So that's the way to think about this. I've got, as a growth lever, something that I can much more easily move and measure its movement accurately. And even though, after running an experiment that moves the growth lever, I may not be able to measure a statistically significant movement in the North Star metric itself, I know it is moving. It's like the hour hand. I can look at it, can't see it, it's moving, but if I see the second hand moving, I know it's moving. So this allows us to do a lot more experiments and actually figure out what's working by focusing on the levers rather than the North Star metric itself. And that's why we built those two tools, to figure out what are the inputs to the North Star metric and where are there levers that we can move. So given that, I've got this notion of, okay, I'm going to focus on moving some levers. So let's say a growth lever is, an example may be for YouTube, that I know that if I can get more people to subscribe to a channel, that drives more watch time. Because maybe their North Star metric is total watch time, how many minutes per day people are watching videos on YouTube. So one of the growth levers might be, can I get people to subscribe to more channels? Another thing might be if I can further optimize the suggestions I'm making to them about what videos to watch. These are the growth levers. Now, what I want to do in this phase is identify how can I get people to sign up for more channels? How can I encourage that behavior? Let's focus on that one for a second. So just because I know what I want people to do, which is I want people to sign up for channels, doesn't mean they're going to do it just because I want them to. You've got to figure out why they want to do it. You've got to give them a motivation. And most of us fall into the trap of thinking, well, we can motivate people to make a decision to do something through logic, because we make decisions logically. At least we like to think that they're going to look at things like cost and benefits and quality and features and so on. They're going to make a logical decision, so that's what we should focus on. But unfortunately, science tells us something different. That we make decisions not based on logic, we make decisions based on emotion. And then we try to justify it with logic after the fact. That sounds like bad news, but actually there is good news that follows that. Science also tells us, and psychology also tells us, that when we make these emotional decisions, even though they're emotional, they're highly predictable. Which means we can use that to figure out ways to encourage people and motivate people. So, let's take a look at some of these examples of how people make decisions and ways we can use that to drive more growth in our product. So this is an example of one of these principles from psychology and behavioral science known as the goal gradient. And basically the principle tells us that the closer you get to completing a process, the closer you get to your goal, the more inspired you are, the more motivated you are to actually reach the goal. So as you get closer to it, you get more motivated. We are compelled to complete things, is basically what it tells us. So this was a really interesting experiment that was run to highlight this process in action. So these are cards that you would get at a car wash, and people were randomly given one of these two cards. On the left, version 1, if you get 8 car washes, you get your 9th one free. On the right, you get a different card that says if you get 10 car washes, you get 1 wash free. However, they stamp the first 2 for you. So, logically, these are identical cards. In both cases, I need 8 car washes and I will get my next one free. So then they looked at what percentage of those 2 randomly chosen groups actually completed these cards. 78% more people completed the card on the right because they already had 2 out of 10 done. They were already on their way. They're more motivated to finish. So, though that is not a logical decision, it is a very repeatable and predictable decision. So how do we use this? So this is something from Google's Ads product. We know from lots of research that people who create multiple variations of an ad, they change the wording and so on, get much better ROI with Google Ads because the ad engine behind the scene has more material to work with. They can try different ads and see which one works the best. It gives it more options, so they will get better ROI. And we tell people that. We recommend that you create at least 3 ads. It doesn't cost any more than creating one version of that. So just a little time to type in extra variants. Yet, even though we say that, most people, the majority of new advertisers, come up with just a single variant of an ad. So how do we get people, how do we encourage people to come up with more than one version of the ad? So this is a case where you go in and you change the UI, and we know that if we want, using the goal gradient, that if we want people to complete something, we should explain it as a process and show them what their progress is. So we just change the UI to something that looks like this, where it shows that, hey, there are 3 you're supposed to do. You can tell that you're on 1 or 3 or 2 or 3, and you can see how many you have left. And by doing this, we saw a significant increase, more than double the number of people who have 3 or more ads as new advertisers. And along with that, they get better return on investment. Another one, this notion of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivations. Intrinsic motivations are things that are inherently valuable to me. They make me feel good, they make me think I'm a good person, they just make me happy, whatever it is. Extrinsic is something external that motivates me. Money is the most common. So, to show this in action, the difference between these, a study was run where you have people who were donating blood, and they went to a population and were trying to get people to donate blood. For half the population that they randomly selected, they said, please donate. For the other half, they said, if you donate, we'll give you $7. So the question is, what happened? Did the additional $7 motivate people to donate more blood? And the answer is, it worked exactly the opposite way. The people who were just asked, will you please donate, were significantly more likely to donate blood than the people who were offered $7. For the people who were just asked to donate, they were thinking about the intrinsic motivation. I like thinking of myself as a person who helps others. For the people who were offered $7, it changes their mindset. Now it becomes a transactional calculus, and I start thinking about, is the $7 worth the amount of time it's going to take me to give blood? And, see, it's going to take an hour, $7 an hour, do I want to do this? It's not worth it. So the notion here is that intrinsic motivations, which can be very powerful, can get crowded out by external motivations. And here's a case where we use this. Again, this is with Google Ads. This is with an email campaign to reactivate advertisers who had churned out of our system. The original email is on the left. And there's two parts to it. The top part, circled in red, is talking about why it's great to advertise and please come back and it'll help your business. And underneath we say, and if you do, we'll give you a $100 certificate to get you started again. We changed that to split those apart and test that. The version in the middle just said, here's $100 if you come back. And the one on the right was just the intrinsic messaging about, please come back, it'll really help your business, it'll be great for you. And somewhat amazingly, we found that the one in the middle showed no difference from the original. They were nearly identical. But the one on the right was significantly better. 50% increase in click-to-open rate, which means when people open the email and then get a chance to read the comment, that they actually click on the action button. And an 80% increase in 30-day spend for these advertisers. Because everyone else was spending their $100 and then leaving again. These people were actually motivated by improving their business. So we save $100 on each of these new customers, and we get much better return. So this is all in the section of how can we figure out how to use science to encourage people to do the things that will move those growth levers that we've identified. So that's the second stage. And the third and final stage is the experiment and iterate stage. And really the goal here is to test those hypotheses that you've just come up with about, I think if I do this, the growth level will move. And also make sure, as I said before, you need to iterate because chances are the first time you try this, it isn't going to work. Or if it does work, chances are that there's still much more headroom to do for you to gain as well. So just as an example of this graphically, this is something that we did with conversion rates for people signing up for Gmail. And red was the default in terms of the message that we were sending out for people to get them to download the app. We then applied some of these scientific principles about how we could change it and motivate people more. And our first attempt, this one actually did work pretty well. You can see that we went from under 0.5% to about 1% in terms of conversion rates. But you can see that we went and did more and more. This is one of my favorite charts that I show internally about you have to keep iterating. Take what you've learned, use that as your new baseline, and try again. You can see that just over 2 more iterations, we were able to roughly double what we got from our first iteration. So that really is the end of the process that we go through. And here's a summary of all the things that we just talked about. You go through these 3 phases, you identify what your growth levers are, you then figure out ways to move them and try and stay away from just random brainstorming and try and use science to help figure out what are going to be the most effective ways to move those levers and get people to change behaviors. And then you run experiments and iterate. So it's a very simple process, but it's very effective. And it gives us what all of us want, which is reliable, consistent growth. Thank you.